Ave Maria.
Thanks so much, Sean. This is a relatively short talk, really, and it's a bit of a concerning talk because I think many parents don't actually realize what's actually happening, particularly what's happening in the school, but in our culture. So I've got a short video. I'm going to just start off to give you some understanding of the problem and why it's raging. There's really a war going on at the moment, and most parents are totally oblivious as to what's actually going on. I think we as parents tend to be so busy with work and life generally, we kind of hope that the schools are doing things okay, and we kind of, as Michael was talking about, that things aren't too bad within the media. We simply go along as if it was like when we were growing up, or when our grandparents, our parents grew up. But there's a war going on for the hearts and minds of our children. And if you're not aware of that as parents and grandparents, it really will be disastrous. I'm going to, the reality is that if we don't take affirmative action, if we don't do what's necessary, and I think Mike and Matt actually went through it beautifully, if we don't do those things, we will lose our children. We will, their souls will be jeopardized. The reality of the statistics, if you look at them now, after 11 years of education in Catholic schools, what can we expect? Well, we can expect 90% of the children who are going to Mass at the age of 11, because prior to that, we would take them weekly and maybe more frequently. You can expect 90% by the time they reach the age of 18 will no longer be going to Mass. Their morals, their beliefs, their value systems will be no different to their non-Catholic peers. That's a fact. That's why we're not seeing the level of baptisms and marriages in our churches today, because our children are all being secularized. Few will have any depth of their Catholic faith or understanding. They won't be able to articulate what it is. When they're asked what it means to be Catholic, they really will struggle with it. And 95% of them will have the same views on issues like same-sex marriage, birth control, cohabitation, IVF, and abortion, all the things. Catholics really just vary ever slightly. Maybe they're a little bit more, might be against abortion, but they can see why it's necessary and why it needs to be in place. They certainly won't fight against it. And then even in Catholic schools, for a child to actually say out loud, when the discussion is going that this is wrong and should not be, is a real challenge. It's a short video to show you what's actually going on in schools, and this goes back to 2011.
On February the 17th this year, which was during our LGBT History Month, we had what we call Creative Day, and we turned that day over to celebrating LGBT rights or human rights.
We made posters and banners about LGBT for the parade.
Please don't care about what they say, let's hope they learn the lesson someday.
So we all gathered in the theatre once we made our banners, and my goodness, the students were so excited. It was so loud in there. And we went out in groups of 15 into the park with our banners, chanting and drumming.
Discriminate for almost no reason, but then I realized that we should all have freedom. Just because they're different to you or me doesn't mean you should that be. Don't find right what's on the street, you stay with it. Don't hate gays because the same as you in the end of the nowadays. Shouldn't have to fight for your rights. Shouldn't have.
Everyone's equal no matter what their sexuality.
You can be what you want to be. If you want to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, it doesn't matter if what people think about you. You should be what you want to be.
Attitudes have changed here because it's only ignorance that causes homophobia. Once you are educated and you celebrate, attitudes do change.
Start with you talking a little bit about what you're going to do tomorrow at Gay and Lesbian Pride Day, and to raise any issues that might have come up in the classroom.
And I don't know what to do about this, but as a school, are we saying that the kids have to support this? I mean, I guess that's what it sounds like to me, that we're saying if a child comes from a background that says that homosexuality is not correct, are we telling that child that they're supposed to, this is what you're supposed to do?
And I don't know if this works for you, but I think that we are asking kids to believe that this is right. Not as a matter of moral principle, but as a matter of, we're educating them, and this is part of what we consider to be a healthy education.
The book is called Asha's Moms, or Mums, really. You can't go on the trip if it isn't. Now, if you were Asha, how do you think you would feel? Why is that, Jamila?
They said you didn't have two moms.
Because the teacher said you couldn't have two moms?
Isaac? Well, her teacher probably didn't know, and she wasn't very open-minded or something. Maybe her teacher knew about having two moms and being lesbian, but she didn't like people like that.
Can you describe a little bit more what you meant by open-minded?
Well, if you're not very open-minded, it's you don't let's say there's a new kind of vegetable or something, and if you're not very open-minded, then you won't try it, because you're not you don't like to try new things and stuff. And if you are open-minded, then you would like to try it. And then if she wasn't very open-minded, then she wouldn't she'd be prejudiced.
11 years old, and I go to Wyndham Middle School. I'm a 6th grader. I was in the library, and this book was on a stand. I'd like to read you a page.
6th grader.
My back over my hips as I ask if we should take our clothes off. And he's saying yes before I finish my sentence. He's pulling off my t-shirt, laughing when I can't undo his shirt buttons. He's undoing my belt. I'm reaching into his bedside drawer for a condom. We're kissing. Again, we're rolling over. Obviously, you can see where this is going. Now, this book was at my middle school, and it was on a stand. When I rented it out to show my dad it, the librarian asked if I wanted more and if I wanted a graphic novel version.
Wow.
They're imaginative, they're all about play, they haven't been baked into, society's norms and expectations, so I think to them, things like being fluid with their identities comes really naturally.
They're setting a great example as being different, and there's nothing wrong with that.
So what are they trying to achieve? They need to educate your children into this. And so your children are exposed to this material through the education system, through the books, soaps, TV programs, right? All of these things now have to have an LGBTQ element in virtually every film you watch. It doesn't really matter whether it's superheroes, fiction, or real life stuff. It seems almost that the government have mandated. And I don't think they have. It's just that it has to be. That's how it is, even though it's not relevant to the story. And of course, social media. So what's the strategy? Well, they realize there's a recognition that the next generation are going to be the voters. They're going to be possibly in government. They're going to be tomorrow's society, and therefore will set things like policy. The other thing as well is that there's a necessity to grow that population. Now, it's often thought that, well, you're born that way. I think that's the propaganda which is pushed out. This is a lie. They do need to grow the population, and this is part of that process because they would need to ensure that we have sexual license, that we can experiment, we can do whatever we want. And that in itself is corrupting on the person and corrupting on the child. The idea really, to some degree, is to collapse Christian society. So we're no longer a Christian society. So in doing that, they need, therefore, to ensure, and that's already been, these are all things which they've already achieved, to make birth control the norm. It really doesn't matter whatever religion you are, whether you're Catholic or what, virtually all, something like 90%, 95% of young Catholics will accept that birth control is a necessity. It's something which we cannot survive in this society without. The whole idea of abortion is fully accepted. And these are things which they've been working on certainly since the 60s. The idea of transient sex, you can have sex with anybody. It doesn't, it really doesn't matter. And of course, marriage is not part of that process. And consequently, that's why marriage has been so diluted now. It's not, most young people expect to live together for quite some time and possibly get married. It encourages a variety of relationships because there isn't a moral ethic anymore. And of course, all the technologies, IVF, cloning, all of this now is becoming a reality because, of course, same-sex couples can't have their own children, so we've got to be able to provide a mechanism whereby they can. So currently now, since 2021, 5 to 10-year-olds must be in their relationships educations, must include an element of LGBT families. And in secondary schools, the relationship and sex education also has to include the biology, if you like, or if you like, the sexuality of LGBTQ ideologies. So our kids are in a real way taught things which maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago we would have regarded as being really not only debauched, but really pretty awful. And I don't think let's say my parents' generation would have ever thought that. To be honest, I didn't think this would come in, but that's where we are. What's interesting is, if we look at the number of organizations, these are the top 10, well, the top LGBTQ organizations. How they've been able to achieve this, because Catholics, I think, are about 10% of the UK population. We've not been able to influence society, certainly in the last 30 or 40 years. And if you look at how effective they've been, what's interesting is if you look at the funding, if you follow the money and see how they're funded, these companies, these are mega companies, all fund these organizations at a colossal rate. In fact, Apple CEO Tim Cook is openly gay. They get a massive amount of money, and of course, that money is also filtered into governments as lobby groups to actually not only change laws, but to have a profound impact on the media, on education, everywhere our children are. And therefore, they know that then in the next generation, things will be quite different. Oh, sorry, these are some of the other companies, as you can see. Okay, so what must we do as parents if we want to be able to protect our children, if we want to be able that our children will grow up not only having the faith, but having the courage to fight the coming war, this war we're currently in? Well, there are things we have to do at home, and there are things we have to do outside the home. So as a Catholic, if we look at the things which will keep our, actually, to be honest, Michael and Matt went through this really well, and in a way, this is a poor version of this, but these are the, if you can give your child a very good Catholic formation, and instantly, grandparents, you're incredibly important here, not only by supporting your children and therefore your grandchildren, but also praying and offering up sacrifice and fasting and all of these things for your grandchildren. But these, if we look at this for a minute, if your child has a good Catholic formation, what is the impact? And this is it. They're much more likely to have traditional values, particularly on family life. They're less likely to undergo high-risk behaviors, substance abuse, premarital sex, and so on and so on. But they need to have that formation. They need, and we'll talk a little bit about formation if we get the time. They need to understand their faith, and they need to have a love for their faith. They're much better at making good life choices, both moral, social, and undertaking works of charity. Why? Because in essence, they have the Catholic faith as their background. They have its moral teaching as their background. They can relate to what they ought to do and what they ought not to do, as opposed to having the state's value system, which really doesn't exist. They're much more likely to become leaders and influence others, even peers, even in their schools and so on. If they stand out, if they object to things. If your child is going to mass and confession regularly and saying the rosary, they tend to be much more supportive of marriage and traditional family values than their peers. They tend to engage much better in education. They perform much better academically. They're much more supportive of the values their parents gave them. Now, this is interesting. If this is an iceberg, and only about 1/10 of an iceberg is above water. If you see that really as the personality, the behaviors of that person, and what's underneath, in fact, is the formation which makes that those behaviors, how the person seems to, the kind of things they would do, their moral values. It's the formation which encourages those sorts of behaviors. So if we look at the ages between, let's say, 0 and 3, about 95% of that influence for that formation comes really from the parents. Siblings, 4%, media, 1%. Because, they don't really watch too much screen time, if you like. Government schools peers virtually has no impact. But as they get older, you can see immediately parents have moved from 95% to 40% now. And some of these other elements have now taken, for instance, siblings, 10%, media, 20%, quite significant. That's to say then their behaviors, what they believe, what they think is real, is now the media is kicking into that. So in film, in soaps, in social media, all of those type of things. Government, 5%, schools, 12%. So those of you who are grandparents probably recognize, you said, my teacher said this. Evolution is true because my science teacher says this. And so now schools are starting to form what they believe and therefore how they act. So this whole issue on same-sex marriage, for instance, now starts to change. So when they get to between 12 and 21, you can see the influence now parents have is down to about 3%, from 95% when they were 3%. And now we see media dominating now at 40%. We see schools at 30%, and we see peers at 20%. So the type of clothes, the type of things, the type of places they go is now dominated very much on the outside. And so what Michael Mett was saying, in fact, about moving out into the sticks and actually having much more time with your children has a profound impact, because if you can you can give your children that formation by the time they reach the age of 18, they can now go into the world, they can go to university, they can now much better tackle the culture. Time is not a renewable source. Once it's gone, it's gone. And time, the amount of time you spend with your children, has a real profound impact on the kind of person they become in later years. And if you think about the amount of recreational time, where do your children spend that? They tend today now spend it much more in technology, smartphones, TV, computers, that whole space. And therefore, if we look at technology now, it's basically being co-opted now, certainly by in the cultural wars, and certainly it's not really under the control of Christian thought. So if we look at in the UK, the average screen time our children have. So in 2015, for instance, 8 to 12-year-olds spent 4 hours, 36 minutes watching a screen, whether it be television, whether it be mobiles, whether it be their tablets or computers. And as you can see, as we've going through this, let me read it out for those who are online. 2015, 8 to 12-year-olds would watch about 4 hours, 4.5 hours worth of screens. 2019, it was up to 4 hours 44. 2021 is 5.5 hours. 13 to 18-year-olds are watching on average about 6.5 hours. 2019, it was 7 almost and a half hours. And by 2021, it was 8 hours and 8.5 hours. And you can see all of those have increased quite significantly. 8 to 12-year-olds, 20% increase. 13 to 18-year-olds, almost 30%. But what are they actually watching in that time? Are they doing creative things like writing vast books or creating software products? Well, you can see here a whopping 3 hours or so is spent watching videos and TV. Gaming is about an hour, almost 2 hours, 1 hour, 46 minutes. Social media, 1 hour, 27, and we go down. At the bottom, you can see content creation. Well, we're down to about 14 minutes. So let's just sort of summarize that aspect of it. If we were to be really conservative and we say the average child, in fact, I did this about 11 years ago, and it's obviously got significantly better, but I haven't really updated the slide. But let's say on average, our children watch about 3 hours of screen time, whether it be video or whether it be computers. And if we multiply that, let's say by 360, let's say for a year, it works out that they watch about 1,000 hours they spend on the screens about 1,000 hours. In a year, that works out to about 45 days. That's constantly, if you can imagine, in 1 year, we give them 45, we don't let them sleep, go to school, eat, nothing else. We just give them 45 days where they're just looking at this. Can you imagine how that, by the time they watch that much screens, their beliefs and value systems, what it's like. If we take it to the age of 18, it works out to about 720 days of screen time, which works out to about 2 years. So in these 18 years, they've spent 2 years looking at their screens. What parents spends 2 years actually in constant chat and development with their child today? If you're working and the rest of it, you're lucky if you get 15, 20 minutes between, maybe eating and talk and and talking with them. That's not good, is it? Okay. So the cognitive impact of the media has on the minds of our children is actually really, really quite profound. It will determine their moral balance, the way they think, the things they feel are important. So as a Catholic parents, what should be our primary goal? Well, we need to prepare our children really for heaven, for eternity. That's what God has given us these children for. Not only are we supposed to have a profound impact on them, but they also have a profound impact on us. They make us actually much more mature, much more responsible. So we need to teach them how to live on earth that they may obtain heaven. And we communicate that most effectively through example and occasionally with words. Example is the strongest predictor of your child's character in future years. Your example. We are called to be as the best parents we could possibly be. It means sacrifice. It means we have to do things which we don't necessarily want to do, but we have to do them because we have people looking at us who want to be like us. And the kind of choices that they actually take on based on our example. So we need to speak to them frequently about faith, about truth, about morals. Help them to understand what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's evil. Because the reality is the media, whether it be film or books, now confuse. You know, back in the day when I was a kid, you knew the good guys because they were well dressed, you know, they didn't swear, they treated women really nice and the rest of it. Now, the good and it doesn't make it, sometimes actually the bad people are actually morally sort of good in a way. So it confuses our young people. So yeah, the thing about it, you have with your children, you have to actually now point out. We know that if you're watching a film together, you have to be able to point out. No, that's, you know, he's supposed to be the hero. He's supposed to be a good guy. But all these things he's doing, he's sleeping around, he's swearing, he's doing all of these things. That's not good. So at least it reinforces in their minds that the world they're seeing within that box is actually is not real. It's not good. So parenting is very much an example, really. You teach primarily through your example. Children are not very good at listening to us, but they're very good at imitating us. If they see you reading, if they see you going to mass regularly, if they see you have a passion for the faith, if they see particularly their fathers going to confession, this kind of, look, even dad needs to get to confession. You know, it has a profound impact, particularly on their sons. So don't worry if the children actually don't listen to you, but know that they're always watching you. And they're much more likely to do what they see than what you say to them. Parents that stand up on issues. So, for instance, whether it be in the school or whether it be, for instance, today was a Rosary Crusade, going to things like that, for instance, or going on marches to defend the faith, or doing anything really which reinforces the faith. You need to do those things. Difficult, you may not have the time, but you need to do this, and you need to take your children with you. So parents is much more in the doing really than the saying. Children tend to follow the actions and language of their parents. If they see that you're industrious, you value real education, they will value this. You know, you probably know of families where the father's mad and keen on football. That's all he spends his time doing. Of course, the kids will do that. But equally, if the father's, you know, industrious, he works hard, he has a great interest maybe in reading or has a great interest in repairing things, of course, children will follow. They naturally do. Boys learn how to become husbands and fathers by observing their fathers, and girls equally with their mothers. But also, boys look at their mothers to know the kind of person they will marry or they would want to marry. And equally the girls, they look at the character of their fathers and base that on the guy they really would like to marry. So Catholic identity. Now, Catholic identity is a really, really important thing. A lot of young people don't really know why they're Catholic or what it means to be Catholic. It's kind of vague thing. We were brought up sort of Catholic, and yeah, we went to Catholic school. We used to go to mass regularly, but since my dad doesn't go, I don't go either, or something of that kind. They don't really have a strong Catholic identity. They need to know what it means to be Catholic. They need to understand the faith itself, have a real deep understanding of it, what the church teaches. That's how they will actually have a great love, not only of God, but of the church and what the church teaches. Parents need to help their children develop a kind of strength of character. It enables them to resist secular culture. If they have that backdrop of the church's social and moral teaching, they know when society teaches the opposite, they know that there's something wrong. One of the important things I was thinking, something which we did, is try and make your house a Catholic home. Sometimes you go into a house where you know the Catholics and the rest of it, but you could never tell that they were Catholics. They don't have statues, they don't have books, they don't have prayers before meals, none of that. It's kind of neutral. And if children have that kind of sense that they're Catholic, then they're much more likely to continue with their faith. So yeah, so certainly do that. So these are things that you need to speak to your children about, really. Parents need to constantly really speak to them about drugs and drink, about what you expect to see from dating. All of these, I won't go through the full list, but those are all very important things. Parents no longer talk to their children about any of these things. They leave it to the school. The school is the default. We, as parents, must do that. So as parents, these are some of the other things we have to do. Pray daily with your children. As Michael Matt said, in fact, this is really a repeat of what he said. I hadn't heard his talks before, so this is it. You need to go to Mass regularly, more than once a week if possible. We, as a family, would go on a Friday as well. Every Friday, we would go to Mass. Go to confession as a family. That's really important. As I said, the children need to see their fathers, I think, particularly go to confession. One of the key things as well is when you go on holiday, sure, even if it's those secular holidays, no reason why you can't take a day out to go and visit some churches and look at Catholic architecture and help children to appreciate it. But try and go on pilgrimage, go to Lourdes, Fatima, all of these things. That can be a great holiday as well. And there's really only one sadness in life, really, and that's not to be a saint. And we're all called to be saints. So that's really the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Santa Maria.